Good afternoon, everybody. It is my great pleasure to introduce Jonathan Tanner. Jonathan is a senior security research at Barracuda Networks. He started in the software engineering and built their malware detection platform. After exposure to various threat maintaining ATP, he found security research to be very interesting and transformed into that role. I already sent you guys his profile and his blog also. He maintains a blog with a lot of very interesting articles. And again, he's a graduate from San Jose State University, so that is amazing. I'll hand it over to Jonathan. Jonathan, all yours.
So I'm a senior security researcher at Barracuda. I say that I'm a recovering software engineer, which will sort of make more sense later. I've competed in the DEF CON wireless CTF 4 times now, and I'm addicted to physical security and lock sport videos. I enjoy craft beer and long walks in the circle pit. I'm the husband to a talented metal bassist and the father of a future hacker who you just heard. So yeah, I started at community college, Diablo Valley College, and did CS and mathematics and art and digital media, and then transferred to San Jose State to continue pursuing a bachelor's in computer science. The company that I work for, Barracuda, had put on a hackathon where it was a programming competition where you create sort of a bot to play a game and compete against other teams. And I ended up winning that. This is the picture from there. And that led to me getting an internship with Barracuda while I was still in school. And I worked on some various projects, like I did a language detection and some things to sort of catch like spam till I graduated from San Jose State with a computer science degree and minors in math and linguistics. Then as soon as I graduated, the VP of technology at the time asked me to work on this project that involved taking malware detection services and sort of creating a unified API for all of our products to use. And that ended up becoming advanced threat protection. And I worked on that for a number of years. I think it was probably my first or second year in. One of my friends at work said I should go to DEF CON, which I hadn't heard of, and but I did, and it was a great time. And I actually have been going every year since then. The second year I went, I had met up with our internal security team at the first conference and sort of kept up with them. And they competed in the wireless CTF at 23 and invited me to compete for the year after that. And we ended up, oh, I just got ahead of myself. Sorry. I also wrote my first blog post for the company shortly after DEF CON. That's why I threw this in here. But yeah, so my security team invited me to come compete on the wireless CTF, and we ended up winning. And also the next year we won. And those are the challenge coins from winning. And then I also started going to B-Side San Francisco in 2017, which there's a lot of security conferences out there. Like DEF CON is one of the biggest, but they have a lot of different B-Sides in different towns, and they are a little more, they're smaller and you can sort of, mingle more, and the focus is different. So I've been going to that every year since as well. And then just recently, I gave my first talk at B-Side San Diego on financial technology and open banking movement, which there is a blog post about the content of my talk. Sorry. So yeah, that's basically my background. I've got basically some security tips that will be useful to like people not necessarily in security as part of the content. So this is the basic security precautions section. Um, so basic precautions that you can take just as an average user. Definitely install antivirus, preferably multiple, because they detect based on what they actually see. So you end up with gaps sometimes, and having more than one antivirus can be helpful for lessening how many gaps there are. I mean, if you have Windows, it has Defender already, so just adding something like Malwarebytes on top of that is helpful. Defender is really good though these days. Keep your operating system and software up to date. I know those little annoying pop-ups that say you have to restart your computer, you know, and then you're in the middle of something, but you need to make time to actually let those install because a lot of times they are actually patching some vulnerabilities. And Microsoft will actually there's a email threads you can sign up for where they'll send out all of the different vulnerabilities that are getting patched. Uh, when you see a link, if you're in doubt about it, especially an email, you can always go to the website directly. So if you get something that says it's from your bank, you can go log into your bank and then make sure that the same message appears as opposed to clicking on the link. Definitely use strong passwords, which I guess is kind of, you know, there's arguments over what a strong password is, but, you know, honestly, password managers are pretty good at creating a strong password for you if you get those set up right. But definitely, you don't want to have like password one as your password or spring 2020. And definitely don't reuse the passwords across multiple sites, which I'll get into in a little bit. Um, I've seen a lot of like passwords from breaches, and like a lot of people will just have their kids or pets names, and that's it. You'll like see two names. Those are very easy to crack. And there's even been research into like if people use like quotes from books that are really long and you think it's strong because it's a very long thing or it's a very long set of text. There's actually systems that will go out there and just try everything available on the internet and try to crack passwords. So you've got to vary it up a little bit. You know, if you change your letters to numbers or something, or there's a what's called a passphrase where you take a phrase or a quote and then you kind of truncate it, not just replacing letters for numbers, but you know, like if it's for you replace the whole word. There's techniques for that that can be helpful in creating stronger passwords. This is a great resource, Have I Been Pwned? You can search your email address and it will tell you if you've been in a publicly disclosed breach. They even get not necessarily a breach, but if a company had like their database open and they weren't sure if it got breached or not, they will often send the users to this, so you'll know that you may have been possibly breached even if it didn't necessarily happen. So this is a great resource to check every once in a while. I don't know how I feel about the password search though, because I mean, if you try your password, I kind of would assume personally that, you know, that password is burned. So I mean, if you want to check if an existing password that you're going to change anyway is out there, that would be good. But I wouldn't like use this to check, should I use this password or not? This is an example, just a public website of breach data. There's tons of it, mostly email and password combinations, which like a lot of attackers will just take these and they'll put them into software and go and try to brute force different accounts. And it doesn't, that's where the password reuse comes in, because they won't necessarily use the Twitter credentials against Twitter. They'll go try it on your Facebook and your email. And if you're using the same password and email combination, you could end up having a different account breached because of that. When you get emails, some things that you can check for phishing is definitely the from address should make sense based on who's sending. I mean, a lot of the attacks out there might be like a Gmail address or some random domain they just registered. So those are the easy ones to spot. There's also a technique called typo squatting where they will replace or they will go register a domain that sounds like a domain. So look for typos, like in the example, Facebook with 2Ks. This happens a lot in more advanced attacks. So if you just give it a glance, it may look right, but it's actually misspelled. If you have any links in there and they put the text or the URL as text and have a link in the HTML version, make sure that the two actually match, because that's often they will put something that looks like a legitimate URL and then the actual clickable URL is different. One caveat with the making sure that the URLs look right is sometimes if you get mass marketing, they may use a forwarding service, so it won't look like it's going to the website you think it's going to, but it actually isn't malicious, although it's usually spammy at the very least when they're doing stuff like that. Read the body carefully, look for odd requests or calls to action based on the content. And look for like grammar and spelling errors. Those are very common in different attacks. You can go on pretty much any email and check the headers, and you can look at the received lines and make sure that it comes from the domain it says it is in the from line. And there's even IPs if you really want to go check if it looks suspicious. You can check that the IP actually belongs to the domain it's supposedly from, and just simply ask yourself, is this an email I'd expect to receive? A lot of these attacks are stuff that it seems like it could be legitimate, but it's not something you'd sort of expect. Like, oh, the common one is your mail system storage is full, click here to resolve the issue. Like, you don't really expect that, or it would, the IT would probably contact you directly, or you get a message within your mail client if that happened, not some email asking you to log in. Also, like, this goes more to like phone calls, but there's a common scam going where they'll call you up saying that they're tech support from Microsoft and there's problems with your computer. Microsoft is never going to call people up saying there's problems with their computer. So stuff like that, if it seems wrong, it probably is, or at least look into it more. Definitely like keep track of who's sending you mail, what types of mail they're sending you. If you get something suspicious, especially the call to action, that should raise some red flags. Wireless networks, since I did the wireless CTF 4 times, avoid open or unprotected networks. It'll be the one without, it won't say WPA on it, or it'll just say open network, or not have a lock depending on what system you're on. These are usually like the public airport or public networks at like Starbucks and airports. Definitely don't, if you have to use them for some reason, avoid logging into any of your accounts, especially your work accounts, because you could lose credentials that way. You can get a VPN service, or if your work provides you a VPN service, you can use that over the public networks to make the connection secure before logging into anything. Just for VPN personal use stuff, it can range anywhere from 50 to 150 a year. So it's not that expensive if you're going to be using it a lot. Definitely much better than having your credentials stolen or other information. On your home routers, definitely use WPA with a strong password, which is not the strong password part, but WPA is pretty much standard how new routers are set up these days. But every once in a while you will see ones running wet, which is very broken. Disable WPS because there's attacks against WPS. And definitely check for firmware updates and make sure that it's updated. There will be sometimes vulnerabilities that they'll update the firmware for, and routers are a very big commodity for attacks these days. For your phones and devices, when you're not using Wi-Fi or Bluetooth, turn it off. It can broadcast your information. You can even be tracked physically using these beacons that it transmits. And also it just drains your battery, trying to find networks when it's not actually being used. If you go to a conference or travel and log into a bunch of Wi-Fi there, when you get home, you can go into your Wi-Fi settings and tell it to forget the network, because a lot of times it'll start beaconing out trying to find those networks again, and that just sends out information about where you've connected and can be useful to attackers. Most corporate networks these days will use WPA2 Enterprise, and the way that's supposed to work is they have a certificate that you're supposed to already have, and when you connect to the network, you supply that certificate, and it verifies that you're connecting to the right network. If you don't have that certificate, it'll ask you to accept their certificate. You should not do that, because that is defeating the entire purpose of the extra security on there, and that someone could spoof the network, and then you'd see a thing saying, oh, do you want to accept this new certificate? And you could end up on a malicious network. They should be providing the certificate to you in some way, but if not, definitely reach out to IT and ask for it, and hopefully they will appreciate the extra security precaution there.
Jonathan,
yeah,
this is great information. I'm curious, do you want to finish your presentation and take questions, or do you want to take questions during the presentation? I mean, this is awesome information, and I'm pretty sure, some of these students might have questions. So do you want to wait till the end, or do you want to take it as you go along?
I guess, so actually, let me do 2 more slides, and then we can have a little break for questions related to this stuff, because then it'll be in between.
That makes sense. That makes sense. All right.
All right. Yeah, so on the wireless, I know one of your assignments because I got to rewatch Silicon Valley for it. Wi-Fi Pineapple, they used it in Silicon Valley to spread their their malicious app, technically. These are real and not that expensive. They're a couple $100, and they can perform man in the middle. You can actually do exactly what they were doing, where you spoof a website and change something that people are downloading. You can harvest credentials by creating fake logins. You can just gather information. There's a lot you can do with these, so that's where the wireless precautions come in. And for the people in MIS specifically, some precautions for development is definitely use well-supported and respected libraries as much as possible. Just some random thing off GitHub that one person's maintaining may not necessarily be the best thing to use. Know how to use the libraries properly, and the best practices. Like specifically, if you're using like SQL, there's what's called like prepared statements, and you want to use those for making your requests, because it handles a lot of the security issues for you. Whereas if you just send a request with your entire statement, you could end up with problems, vulnerabilities. There's the OWASP top 10 web app security risks, and it'll cover a lot of the different things like that. And so you should be familiar with what they are and how to mitigate them with whatever technology stack you're using. And even if you think, oh, it's just an internal site, it's only going to be exposed to people at my company, it could still be at risk, because all it takes is one person clicking an email with malware and they get infected, and then you've got an attacker in your network, and they can take advantage of these same vulnerabilities to dump your database, and then next thing you know, you've got a data breach. So you always want to use these precautions, even if it's just an internal website. So if there's any questions related to that segment, I can do those now.
Yeah, so actually, one person posted that, have you heard of privacy.com? I use this to create burner cards for all online shopping. That way, I don't have to worry about overcharges or getting it stolen.
Yeah, I have heard of that. I haven't used it personally, but it definitely seems like a good resource. Um, one of my coworkers, was he uses that, and he was actually going out and buying Visa gift cards for everything that he was using that he didn't trust. So that definitely helps not have to do that. It's definitely a good idea. Also, sort of, especially if you have to make a purchase decision or purchase from sites that you don't necessarily trust. Like if you're just using Amazon or some large company, you probably don't necessarily need to use that much precaution. But if you're buying from a bunch of smaller third-party sites, it can definitely help.
All right. I noticed you said do not accept the security certificates. So I realized that, every time I try to connect to a trusted network, even San Jose State University's network, it asks me to accept a security certificate. And so you said don't accept it by default, download it. Is there a method to do that? One. And second is, I mean, if it is a trusted network that I know, that I'm familiar with, do you still recommend not connecting to it or not accepting it and downloading it and connecting to it?
If you can verify that that certificate it's asking you to accept is good some other way, that's fine. I guess it is kind of a pain, and a lot of the users of the WPA enterprise or the IT setting it up don't necessarily make the certificates easy or available all the time, especially at San Jose State. I do remember those having to click accept a couple of times. But when you get into the work environment, you should be able to contact IT a little bit more easily. I mean, there may be cases where you do have to click accept, but and also you don't necessarily have to install the certificate all the time. If you can get just you can view the certificate when it asks you to accept it, and there will be the information. You can see, I mean, you sort of need some knowledge about how the certificates work, but it'll be signed probably by a certificate authority that you can verify. Or there's a field called the hash, and if you just ask IT for, hey, is this hash valid? Then it should be okay to accept.
Okay.
But
Uh, as a security professional, what is the biggest security threat, or first top three biggest security threats that are going on right now?
um, like in general, or like just cybersecurity specifically?
Uh, Actually, that's interesting. Maybe both. I'm curious to know now.
I mean, phishing is huge. Like that's definitely, and there's all different sorts of types of phishing, uh, which I cover a couple like a little bit later. But
Okay.
yeah, phishing is definitely, and like part of phishing is they'll send malware. Um, and the big trends on malware these days, like you hear a lot about ransomware, and it is out there, but the big one is information stealing, because if they steal login credentials or personal information, they know they're going to make money. It may not be much, but you aggregate enough of those, and it's guaranteed money. Whereas ransomware, it's, are they going to pay the ransom or not? And it's really been dropping out of favor. There's even cryptocurrency miners that'll just use your resources and mine cryptocurrency. That actually, a lot of the ransomware campaigns have sort of shifted to that cryptocurrency mining, or they were for a while. Although that's becoming less lucrative, so they're pivoting. But
Then I have one more question, which basically asks, do you have a VPN that you recommend, or an antivirus, or a malware, anti-malware?
um, yeah, I've always liked Malwarebytes as like one of them. You do have to run it manually, but they do seem to have a good coverage of a lot of some of the stuff that others miss. And then Windows Defender, if you have Windows, is good. Um, like I've always just used free ones. So like I've had AVG free and Malwarebytes free. Avira is really good. Full disclosure, they are one of our partners, but they do have really good detection. Um, as far as VPNs go, so there's like NordVPN is a good one. You can look up like top VPNs, and like the most of the lists out there are pretty good, but Nord is usually well regarded. There's People's Internet Privacy, or it's got People's in the name. I don't remember exactly, but definitely look for ones uh, like this kind of goes is kind of a BitTorrent thing to say, like they always recommend no logs of VPNs, but as far as security in general too, like them not storing logs means they're taking security more seriously. So like any of the ones that are like say they're no logs tend to be more secure in general, even if you're just using them for normal use.
So no log would mean they don't maintain any log of access to the VPN or connection to the VPN. So in other
Yeah.
words, if there was a subpoena, they don't have anything to disclose.
Yes. Um, that's correct. And a lot of them will operate out of countries that can't be subpoenaed in the first place for that reason as well. Um, but yeah, Nord's definitely one of the ones that comes to mind as being one of the top ones out there. But there's others out there as well that are good. I personally use CyberGhost, but I can't say I've had like sort of uh, mixed feelings about it. You know, sometimes the connections aren't that fast, but it is pretty well regarded as well. And I've used it for travel, and it's worked fine for that.
All right, thank you. I think that's all the questions that we had, and we'll wait for the end of the presentation now.
Okay, sounds good. So a recent research, since I do all the research and blogs, this is one of, and we are doing a video as opposed to being inside of a classroom right now. This is some recent research I did, was on coronavirus related phishing attacks. So I'll go over some of the findings from that, and there's some tie-ins to like some of the email security information I just went over. So malware was definitely a big one. Um, a lot of, as I mentioned, like the credential stealing and information stealing is very popular. That was the majority. Oh, and banking information. They try to get your banking credentials and information. So those are definitely the majority of what's being distributed through the coronavirus related, like pretending to be information or about coronavirus. Stuff you can spot in this email specifically that would tip you off is there's some bad grammar, and definitely for any email you have it has the double extension sort of uh, with the PDF, an extension you recognized, followed by the .gz, which is an archive. So the file inside that archive is not going to be a PDF. That's another thing you can look for. I recommend actually if you're on Windows, most of these target windows anyway, you can enable showing of file extensions, the full file extension in your preferences. That definitely helps with spotting stuff like this. So scams were another big one. They often like make up a fake organization that sounds like a real one. So the World Health Organization is real, but they were the World Health Community. Uh, Not sure exactly why they did that, but you know, maybe it makes it easier to or harder to, you know, just search for who's spoofing World Health Organization. Uh, but yeah, the fake organization should be a tip off. You Google that name, and if anything comes up, it's going to be about this attack. Uh, they're asking you to donate to a Bitcoin wallet. That's definitely suspicious there. And then the typos and bad grammar and use of caps, your urgent support is needed. That's often used in scams and phishing attacks. The other types of scams, other than fake charities, there's fake medical supply suppliers, claiming that they're selling masks or gloves, but it's just a scam. And then there was even ones claiming to have vaccines for sale. Credential phishing, in addition to using malware to steal credentials, attackers will often just set up a website that asks you to log in, and it'll look like a legitimate login page most of the time. Sometimes it doesn't if they get lazy or want to target multiple, but often it'll try to spoof an actual login page as much as possible. This is, I guess it doesn't really show because I can't hover over it, but in the next slide, if you check the URL, it does not match the URL that they showed in the email. And so it asks you, and it's an informational page, and then when you click on it, it takes you to a Microsoft login. And notice it's scholarcave.com instead of ecdc.europa.eu. That's where the URL mismatch. And you shouldn't see the Outlook login screen for anything that's like not outlook.com or an official Microsoft website, or maybe your company's email. And they also have the dangerous pops up. Probably had a bad security certificate or revoked one. You can check the certificates on stuff like that, and definitely if there's no HTTPS, Chrome at least will give you a warning about that, and make sure you're not logging into anything that's not HTTPS. The Outlook and Office 365 are very popular to fake credential sites these days. So beyond just the cybersecurity, there's operations security is kind of it's a military term, and it has to do with securing their military operations and the information, denying the enemy information about those operations. But it does sort of have its place within like the business world. And then physical security refers to anything that's physical, like doors, gaining access to different locations in a building, or gaining access to the building itself. That's physical security. So the first phase in any attack is reconnaissance, which is information collection about the target. Any information that you make available could be used against you, or if the company makes information available, it could be used against them. And then there's a ton of data available from breaches, which you can't control, but what you can control is information that you put out there. You can somewhat mitigate the breach data, even by not supplying as much information to different profiles, but sometimes you have to, or for whatever reason. Stuff like your employer, job title, different connections and friends, location data on check-ins, and even phones, or even your photos can leak information. If you're writing, like maintaining information about your company, information can be used. Giving too much information can be used to attack that company. The employee lists, different contracted services and suppliers. So like it's called social engineering, where you try to, it's actually what sort of phishing employs. You're trying to convince someone that you are someone that you're not, and that carries over into like the reconnaissance, and they will look up the information so that they can paint a better picture of trying to pretend to be who they are, or who they are not rather. So if they know who picks up your garbage, they can pretend to be them, a representative of that company or suppliers. Okay, so to pictures, like let's say you post a picture of your key online. A lot of this information actually is from talks on Deviant Ollam or by Deviant Ollam. He's very well known in lock sport and physical security community and has a lot of great information. But this video particularly covers like how to take a photo. It doesn't even have to be that high resolution, but you can drop the photo in Photoshop, even if it's at weird angles, and decode the key and then go create your own copy of it. So you want to definitely avoid posting any pictures that have keys in them, because this is not that hard to do. You can take those numbers to a locksmith and just say, hey, I need a quick set key with this bitting code, and they'll cut you that key in that picture right there. Probably no questions asked. You can help mitigate stuff like this by covering your keys. So on the left it fits a single key, but it's a little multi-tool that can be handy. You actually would want to mount the key in the reverse from what it is, so that the bitting is facing inward. But these can be used to prevent keys from being photographed, or if they are photographed, from being used. This doesn't just relate to you posting photographs of your keys. If you leave your keys sitting out, someone could walk by and take a picture of it real quick. And so that's another thing to keep in mind. And then there's the Key Smart, which you can mount a bunch of keys into it, kind of creates a multi-tool of all your keys. And at the same time, it also does protect the profiles of it, in addition to not having a bunch of loose keys in your pocket. So that's pretty useful. So badges, that's another. You may have an employee badge with your picture on it that you're supposed to wear. Avoid getting photographed with that, or taking photographs of other people's badges. That this sort of goes into like a little bit beyond like most attackers would do, but if they're really trying to attack your company, they will try to gain physical access, and having an ID badge is part of that. And you may say, well, I have to use the RFID to get in anyway, so just being able to mimic a badge is not that big a deal. They can get that too, though. There's devices. All three of these devices will copy your RFID credentials, and then they can put it onto their fake card. The one on the bottom left is only $45, although it only covers like certain card types, but it looks like a key fob. And so it's not that conspicuous. The one on the right is a long range reader. It'll actually read up to 3 or 4 feet. So in this picture, they put it into a bag, and they could just walk by or just post up somewhere and just swipe credentials at a range of about 3 feet. So it's definitely possible. This is also like kind of the same thing of your keys. Don't leave them sitting out where someone can photograph them. Don't leave your IDs sitting out, or especially unattended, where someone can come by with one of these devices and clone it real quick. It's not really much you can do about the giant long range reader, except for look for suspicious people. But that's not a lot of people would be using something like that. It'd be more like a close range thing most of the time. So you can try to mitigate that. That's like badge control is a huge part of securing like the physical perimeter and your company. So try to help them out a little bit by making your badge as secure as possible. But chances are, even like if they can get a fake picture on their badge that looks like they belong there and can't get the RFID, chances are they won't need to clone your badge, because someone will probably just let them in being polite. It happens a lot, especially at larger companies. You're not going to recognize everyone. If you do happen to be at a smaller company, it's easier to spot people that don't belong and sort of question them. But a lot of the pen testers that do like physical go on site and do stuff, that will just get let in by people, and that's how they get their first established there, and then they can do all sorts of stuff once they're inside. So to sort of recap the key and badge ID, don't post photos with your keys or badges in them. avoid wearing your keys or badges in public. Like the guy had his badge just out. I mean, if you have to wear it at work for people to identify you, that's one thing. But you go to lunch, take the badge off and put it in your pocket real quick, then put it back on when you get to work, or at least like flip it backwards so that no one can see it. Don't leave them lying around, especially in public, because all it takes is a picture or a quick swipe with an RFID reader. Uh, if wearing is a requirement by your company, and you see someone who's not wearing one, ask them to see it. It's not rude. Like, I mean, depending on how you come across, be polite about it. But just asking to see a badge is not rude. It doesn't matter who it is. Someone had a story where it's like, the CEO would refuse to wear their badge, and then someone would ask to see it, and they had a conversation about that and like about setting the right example, and they started wearing their badge. And as far as like letting people in, if you got something that requires a RFID badge to get into, and someone you don't recognize is coming up, you could. I wouldn't consider it rude to say, hey, just as a security precaution, can you badge in yourself instead of me letting you in? I'd love to hold the door for you, but I'm trying to ensure that everyone is supposed to be where they are. A lot of this also refers to home, especially like key stuff. So your home has locks on it. I've heard plenty of people who are like, oh, I live in such a great neighborhood, I don't need to lock my door even. Please do. Doesn't matter where you are. Like there's reasons why there's locks on there, and make sure that the locks are decent as well. There's a lot of really bad locks out there that are really easy to get to bypass. Although most criminals will probably just kick in the door or break a window, but it still helps. If they can just open the front door and get in, then they're going to take the path of least resistance. They'll probably check that the doors are locked before they actually break into a place. There are RFID blockers that you can put stuff like your badge in, or your passport, anything that's got an RFID chip. If you do buy those, please test them out before you rely on them. Some of them don't work. I guess the passport's a little harder to test out, but if it's like your Visa that has the swipe to pay pass, or your work badge, you can easily, slide it in, go try to badge in at work, or go try to make a payment at a store and make sure that it's actually blocking the signal. Typically, the ones that cost more are going to be the ones that are a little bit better, although you can find some good buys and check the reviews. Location. So this is an example. Someone took a picture of their house and it has their geolocation data embedded in the picture. A lot of social media these days, I think, will try to strip out this information, but not always, and it's better to just be safe. Plus, they're probably storing that location even if they strip it out. But yeah, you can plug those coordinates right into Google Maps and know exactly where this house is located. Both Android and iPhone, and I guess I forgot Windows Phone, if that's even still a thing, but I'm sure they have it too. You can turn off the geolocation in pictures. It may be default to be turned off by now, but last time I got a phone, it wasn't, and I had to turn it off. In Android, you just go to your camera settings, and there's the save location. You just turn it off. And then iPhone, you go to the privacy settings, and then you can go into location and then camera and tell it to never do the location. But definitely, at minimum, deny location to the camera or turn off the geolocation, because just like the example, you take a picture of your house and then suddenly someone could know where you're at exactly, and then with more information, maybe they break into your house. Same goes with like work. Also, the newest version of Android actually updated their location settings to be more granular. You can actually deny applications location data when they're not being used. I found out about this feature when I updated my phone and suddenly it said Uber was trying to access my location when I was not using Uber, and it gave me the option to deny it location when it's not in use. So apparently Uber will ping your location every so often, just to keep tabs on where you're at. in their mind probably for making it faster to find a driver when you need it, but at the same time, you don't want your location being pinged back all the time. Don't add location to post. Like, tagging your location while you're out, especially if you're on vacation or something. Uh, if you had a burglar interested in your house, and then you like post a bunch of photos that, hey, I'm on vacation now. They know that your house is not attended, and that's the time that they would, go strike. If you feel like it is worth adding the location, you can always, save your photo, post it with the location after you get home. So, a little bit of deception there, that, so you're not saying where you're at this moment, just that you've been somewhere. In looking up this information, actually, apparently Twitter completely removed the feature to add your location completely for both security reasons, and it just wasn't being used that much. But Facebook still has it. They might have fixed this then, but years ago I was chatting on Facebook chat with someone, and I could always tell when they were driving because it was actually feeding back their location on the chat in real time. And if it started changing cities pretty fast, I'd know they were on the freeway. So yeah, you definitely, and I'm sure you can disable that if it's not already through your Facebook settings. Various tips, related to that. Definitely explore your privacy settings and set as much privacy as possible. Don't make anything fully public. But even friends of friends, if someone's like reconnaissance, back to the reconnaissance side, if someone's like really trying to get information about you, they can probably create a fake Facebook account and become friends with one of your friends or whatever social media. So, limit based on what the information is, try to limit it to only the audience you want. And obviously anything public is public. And with like the passwords where it's like the kids' names, you got if you have a public Facebook profile and it's has like, oh, my kid's so and so and so and so, that's the first thing that an attacker might try as your password is your kids' names. So try to restrict access to that information as much as possible. Don't add everyone who sends you a friend request, vet them a little bit, or maybe even make sure that you know them, depending. Like I get on LinkedIn, it's about networking. So you're going to want to accept some requests from people you don't necessarily know if they're in the same field as you. But, give their page a profile a look, make sure everything seems right. And, you want to connect with them. And in the same thing, like, send out, why you're connecting when you are connecting with people, makes it easier. Definitely don't share personal information or information about your work. On your social media, especially open to people, because that's another place where attackers, if they find out you're an employee of a company, they will, start seeing what you're posting about the company. Look for the badges and photos and stuff like that. Avoid using like the one login where it says sign up using your Google or Facebook account. Avoid using that as much as possible, especially with like stuff that's not affiliated. Like if it's Instagram or something, since that's part of Facebook anyway, that's one thing. But there's a lot of third-party sites that will request access or request or allow you to use your credentials from Google and Facebook and stuff like that to create an account. And that's just exposing your account. If that site gets breached, and then they can get in. They will almost always offer a sign-up option otherwise. So just take the time to sign up with an email and password instead of like saving the time to one click. It doesn't take that long. Especially most browsers will save most of your data, like your name and stuff, to fill in automatically. It's good to have, I recommend having at least a couple, 2 or 3 different email addresses for different purposes. Stuff like that's fun, quote unquote, like social media, and like sites you're gonna get spammed from can have like one or two different email addresses, but definitely important stuff like your banking, or maybe if you want like a professional email account that isn't tied to your work in case you change jobs, but you still want to maintain connections, create a separate account for that. Uh, but so like, if they gain access to like one account, your email account, attackers will basically have the means to take over any account that that email has used. They can do a password reset at that point. So if they breach your Twitter account, you don't want them to also be able to get, or your email account that's associated with their Twitter, you don't want them to be able to get access to your banking information as well. So segmenting stuff like that based on like the sensitivity level is definitely a good idea. Uh, and also beyond just security, when it comes to social media, employers may look at what you post. Nowadays they probably will. So keep it a little professional. I mean, they realize that you got life outside of work, but you don't want to do anything that'll turn off future employers. So yeah, so and then just a little bit of advice. I didn't get a chance to use any memes before this, so I did a double meme. Memes are very popular in security talks. Advise as a student, seek out internships for sure. I definitely was glad that I kind of stumbled into that internship. I was planning to seek them out anyway, but that worked out really well, and you gain a lot of experience. A lot of internships are temporary, like over the summer, and those ones are good because you can explore different career paths. Like maybe pick an internship in something you're not sure if you want to do or think you might want to do, but you're not sure about. Or even if it's something you think you want to do, you may find out at the end of the internship that that wasn't the right path for you, and you can go back and sort of rethink where you want to go with your career without having to invest time as like a fully employed, which is a little bit harder. Take advantage of student discounts, and I don't just mean the 10% off your burrito, although that is awesome. A lot of conferences, I'm specifically security, but I'm sure any conference will have like discounts or even free passes for students. I know even like Google I/O does a certain number of student passes at a discounted rate. There's even if they don't, sometimes there's organizations that will offer student to pay for student passes. So definitely, if you're interested in going out, or you should be interested, should try to go out and like attend stuff, but look for discounts and freebies and stuff like that. It's a great way to get access without breaking the bank, because a lot of that stuff does get a lot more expensive once you're no longer a student, especially like Google I/O into the thousands now, I think. If you can find clubs and groups at school that interest you, definitely take advantage of that. I was in at both colleges the computer science clubs. It doesn't necessarily have to be like a club related to your career. Just anything you're interested in. If you find a club for it, or you can even start a club if you're really into something and there isn't one. It's possible. And definitely, I know you're busy, but take time to relax and decompress every once in a while. Uh, Even if you have to schedule that in, although that may defeat part of the purpose, but you can't just be go all the time. You got to relax every once in a while still maintaining, everything you've got to take care of, obviously. As far as career, hopefully some of you get the reference to Glenn Glary, Glenn Ross, but always be learning. There's meetups you can go to. I go to occasionally. Netflix has meetups, every couple of months, and they're great, and they'll cover different topics. Some of them are security, some of them are like operations, like how to run all their different instances and stuff. But the Netflix meetups are great if you do anything with technology or programming, and they're free, or even if you're just interested in learning about that stuff. And then they got free food too. It's always a plus. Conferences are great. or just like I say, grabbing a beer, but beer might not be your thing, but just meet up with people that you work with or with similar career field and just talk to them. Pick each other's brains, get different perspectives. There's a lot to be learned from stuff like that. Try things out of your comfort zone. This might even shift your career path. Like when I went to DEF CON, I was like, I had always kind of had an interest in security, but I was always like, oh, I don't know enough about this. I need to learn more. And I kind of just got this realization that, maybe I can't do these things they're talking about, but I can understand what they're talking about. And it just made me realize that I could learn uh, now as opposed to having to go learn just to learn. And then so eventually I ended up like completely changing career directions from programming to security research as a result. Um, if you're doing development work or even just stuff you use on a daily basis software wise, like try different stuff out. um, Try, if you do like SQL databases, try NoSQL, learn about those, learn the different benefits of both, because NoSQL is becoming huge. I've used one called Cassandra for pretty much everything I've worked on at work, and that's a very big competitor to like SQL based storage these days. I use Linux almost exclusively, with like an exception of one computer, and I love it most of the time. But definitely, even if you don't want to, you don't have to use Linux, but know some of the basics of how to use it. So if you're ever in a situation where they're like, we need someone to do this on Linux, or you end up with some place where they actually require it, which is not likely, but they might, be familiar with it. It's definitely got some powerful tools, a lot of which are sort of rolled into Mac these days too, which I'm sure a lot of people use, but I definitely am a fan of Linux for a large variety of reasons. Network with people in positions you hope to achieve, especially like, if you meet them at conferences or speakers, whatnot, like network with them. You might even end up with like a mentor relationship out of it. It's definitely good to have those sort of connections. Know your worth. Don't be afraid to compromise if it'll help you to get where you're going. But when you get hired at a job, you have the discussion of how much you're going to make. Know like sort of what range you should be making based on your worth. If I say don't be afraid to compromise if it'll help, because sometimes maybe you know you're more interested in your career development path and you need to take a pay cut to get where you're going, because you want to do something, as opposed to the value of what you were doing before. You could make more doing one thing, but you want to do something else and gain experience there. So but this still falls under like knowing how much you're worth, because then you've made an educated decision. um, Moving up doesn't always have to be your career path. I guess this doesn't really relate. I guess I shouldn't have put moving up. I guess like managing doesn't have to be like, if you're a business management major like my wife, obviously that's what you've chosen. But like in tech now, there's a big push for like allowing people to grow and gain higher titles without having them have to be managers. Because once you start like become like a manager in title, you do a lot less of whatever you were doing before, and a lot more of the day-to-day emails and the employees and reviews and stuff like that. So if you really enjoy what you're doing, be it like marketing or coding or whatever, just work out with your company. Like, even if they're like, hey, we want you to be a manager, and you don't want to be like, hey, could I find a different path for my career that will still let me advance without having to give up what I love doing. Uh, I mean, managing is not for everyone, like, but that is the traditional way to move up, is you start taking on people specifically like that role. Another like Silicon Valley example was like Guilfoyle, and they tried to assign him the five coders, and like he sort of architects a lot of the thing, but he didn't want to have people working directly under him. One of the things he possibly could have done was take one of those 5 people, work directly with them, and make them the manager of the other 4. And then he only has to sort of go through one person and keep doing what he's doing. But he had other ways of dealing with that, apparently. Yeah, but yeah, definitely be open with your employer, about where you want to go. They'll appreciate it, and they'll help you get there. Hopefully, I mean, it should be a dialogue, and hopefully you'll feel comfortable having that dialogue with them. Life advice: try to avoid letting your personal life interfere with your career. This might just be like you get too drunk the night before you have work. Think things through. It's not fun getting through a work day hungover, or like if you're having issues with family or at home or whatever. Going to work can help. Can be if you can get yourself out of the mindset of, if you're like, I'm going to work now. It could be a break, and then you sort of have a fresh perspective when you get back to resolving those issues. Definitely have some hobbies. Not everything can or should be about work. Appreciate family and friends, and have fun within reason. I mean, there's such thing as too much fun, but have fun. And that's it. Any more questions?
So this is awesome, actually. Before I open it up for questioning, I have a question for you. So some of these advice that you share are awesome, and I've shared it with my colleagues, my friends, family. And one thing that comes up is, are you being too paranoid? I mean, what is the likelihood that an individual will get targeted for ransomware or for phishing attack or any other attack? In other words, I mean, most people believe that they will not be the victim, or they will not be the they will never be attacked because they don't have anything to hide, kind of a mentality. So what do you say to them?
Yeah, I mean, there's such thing as too paranoid. I probably am slightly on that border. But definitely like, you definitely, stuff like that, it's not even like you're necessarily targeted all the time. They get these email lists from the same place that people who send spam do, and they will just send out as many as possible and hoping to infect people. So you will definitely see uh, phishing attempts. May not be like super targeted, but depending on what your role is, like if you're the assistant to the CEO or something, like you should definitely expect to get targeted, because that's a way for an attacker to get directly to the CEO. Um, and there's also like, I've sort of framed this a lot about attackers uh, as like the malicious attackers. You'll also, it's really, pen testing is huge these days. Like a lot of companies are seeing the benefits in contracting it, and even have requirements sometimes depending on the industry. It may not just be a malicious attacker. It may be a pen tester, but you don't necessarily want to be the person that let that pen tester get into your building or into your network. So they're going to be using the same kind of tactics that an attacker might, at least a more sophisticated attacker. So, these security precautions can help you there as well, for not being the one mentioned on the pen testing audit as this is how we gained access, which hopefully your company shouldn't reprimand you for. They should definitely have a discussion, but sometimes they do. And you definitely don't want to be the one that caused a breach, because you probably will get fired on that one.
All right, that's good advice. I'm gonna unmute everyone so that if they have a question, they can ask you directly. One question that actually, two questions that I have is, one is DEF CON postponed this summer? And the second question is, do you work remotely? I'm considering doing it myself, but I'm concerned about it negatively impacting my career progression.
Um, so DEF CON, I just read about this yesterday, actually. DEF CON will have an answer about whether or not it will be occurring on June 1st. They've they've been evaluating the situation, how the coronavirus has been progressing in other countries, and when they've sort of opened things back up, and they've sort of set June 1st as like that's the latest that they could possibly pull it off, kind of last minute. I'm sure they're still planning it, but that's at the point where they'd have to actually start contracting. So yeah, they've said by June 1st. Dark Tangent is the organizer. He will post whether or not it's happening this year or at the normal time. I kind of doubt they would postpone the main DEF CON. They did postpone DEF CON China, but the main one is coincides with Black Hat. So to shift both of those would probably just be too much. They'd probably have to skip a year. I'm sorry, what was the second question? Part of that question?
The second question was, how does remotely working impact the
Oh,
career progression?
yeah, I have been working remotely. I mean, it has its challenges depending on how well you can get set up and how well you can isolate from other things and not be distracted. Um, I don't. It, it depends on the employer, like how it impacts your career. Some employers, once we go back to not everyone working remote, will expect people to be in the office, and some are more flexible. My employer is very flexible about that, which is, one of the things I really enjoy about being there. In addition to things like completely shifting my career focus, um, I know a lot, like some of the people that I competed with on the wireless CTF that do like more hands-on security, like pen testing stuff. Like a lot of them will not work in an office. Like they solely work remotely, and they're perfectly successful with that. So, I mean, it takes a little bit of leverage probably in the form of having experience and established like proven skills to get to get those sort of things necessarily. But I'm like kind of comes back to like knowing your worth. Like, if you absolutely want to work remotely and know you're capable of it, that could be something you could definitely like, you know, put into the negotiation part when you're looking for a job, or discuss with them. They may even do like a trial basis, like work from home 1-2 days a week, see how it works out. And, once you've proven that you can do that, you could go full time. But yeah.
Uh, this is an exciting question, and actually, I have the same question. The question is, what are some of the cool things that you saw at DEF CON? And I have an extension to that question. How does it feel to go to a conference where everybody's a hacker? I mean, are you scared? Are you excited? You're walking around and you don't even know. I mean, you're talking about people just, these are the hackers. These are the world-class hackers. They can. What kind of security measures do you follow? Do you have those RFID wallets, and do you literally switch off your computers, take off the batteries so that it's not transmitting anything? What kind of precautions do you take when you're in the middle of the hacking conference?
Okay, that's I probably could have made a slide about that one. Well, first to the first question, I think one of the coolest things I saw probably was someone had hacked a Tesla Model S. You can look up the video. It was at DEF CON 23. And they were actually turning people away from that talk. So I went to another talk and didn't really like it. So I tried going back, and they were letting people in. So I did get to see that one in person. But that was pretty cool. And since I'm into wireless and like physical security, like a lot of the things you see related to that, like someone did a talk last year where they had sort of found a bunch of vulnerabilities in Ford keyed fobs that could let you kind of take over the key fob and then open people's cars under certain circumstances, or you could deny them access to their cars. So that was pretty interesting as well. As far as precautions, and I've kind of like done a lot of sort of thinking about like different levels of precautions, especially at the different conferences. So like if I go to B-sides, I consider that slightly more, or quite a bit more, or less of a security conscious thing I need to do. What I definitely would do anywhere at minimum is like don't connect to the public networks, obviously, or have a VPN ready, but turn off all your email automatically syncing, because that's another thing. Like if your thing is just automatically connecting to networks all of this, through Wi-Fi, and it picks up a different network, and that's malicious, and then it sends its credentials to go log into your email account or pulls a bunch of emails. That immediately, especially if it's your work email, could be a big problem. So that's the minimum I'd recommend at any sort of security conference or a place where you're not sure about, the wireless waves, is definitely turn off automatically syncing your email. And then when you feel secure about where you're at and or over VPN, then you can go manually check your emails if you need to. When I go to DEF CON though, I bought an unlocked phone off of Amazon for a couple $100 maybe, and I have a SIM card, a burner, or like a prepaid SIM card that it only costs me $3 a month to maintain the phone number, and then when I get to DEF CON, for $20 I can add 3 gigs of mobile data and unlimited talk and text for a week. So I use that phone exclusively when I'm at DEF CON. Like I bought like a little RFID bag that's actually intended for like evidence collection, so it's like legit, and I'll put my regular cell phone in there when I land and don't pull it back out until I fly back, and then I just use the burner the whole time. I even bought my wife a burner so that I don't have to worry about exposing her phone number to any sort of attacks. Although she did, her and my daughter came with me last year to DEF CON, which was awesome. Because my daughter's birthday actually is on when DEF CON coincides most of the time, so she'll be going to DEF CON a lot as she grows up. As far as laptops go, I have a specific laptop I bring just to DEF CON. But if you have to bring your work laptop and do work, the same thing, like don't leave your email sync on or connect over when you're connected over like unsecured or not trusted networks. You can like close out your whole browser and turn off your email sync. So, and then when you're in a secure place, then you can go synchronize it. DEF CON actually has a thing called the Wall of Sheep. It's a contest where they will go try to find, this is not for malicious purposes, but they'll go try to find people connecting to their malicious open networks that mimic the quote unquote good open networks. And then like you'll see like user credentials sometimes. They probably mask it out these days, but there's a whole competition dedicated to getting people to connect to malicious or untrusted networks.
All right, thank you so much. I think we have run out of time. I'm going to unmute all of them for one last question if one of them have it. Otherwise, we'll give you a big round of applause for awesome wisdom. Anybody has any questions? All unmuted.
So you mentioned about like a virtual private network in your presentation, and I wanted to know, like, I want to use a VPN. I also want to connect to the campus server for their VPN. But would you recommend if there will be any other like softwares that are paid, and does the price of the VPN matter?
These questions are always really individualistic too.
Yeah, so like usually the VPN will come with software you need to connect. There's also like what's called a proxy, which is not even the VPN services will like sell those. That's not secure, so don't use the proxies. Definitely use the VPN. The proxies are more intended for like I mentioned BitTorrenting if you're trying to hide from your ISP. But it's not secure packets over the proxy. VPN actually encrypts end-to-end all the traffic. So that's definitely the secure way to go there. I mean, you definitely don't want to spend too much. You can't afford it on the VPN, but they're pretty reasonable. Like $100 for most of them a year. You can pay your yearly, and you get
I know it spits out
for multiple years.
Oh wait, no, that is actually the case.
I hope that answered the question.
Yeah.
All right. Anyone else? If not, guys, I think there's a huge round of applause in order. Thank you so much, Jonathan. That's excellent advice. I'm gonna split this video into smaller videos of individual, recommendations. And thank you so
sorry.
much. Yeah, go ahead.
Are we still there?
Yes.
I had one more thing I just thought of on the VPN. If you're a work VPN, it may, like, if you're using your works VPN, it may not be securing all of your traffic. It may only be securing traffic into your work resources. So definitely know whether or not that's the case before you trust it fully to log into like personal accounts. Because they can set your VPN up so it only secures certain IP addresses, not all of them.
That makes sense. All right. Thank you, guys. Thank you so much, John. If I come across, if they have more questions, I'll send them to you on an email.
Yeah, definitely.
But yeah, thank you so much for coming. I hope we can invite you again.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Thank you so much. Take care.
You too.